We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We are recording at a 10 a.m. time slot, Eastern Daylight Time,
Yes.
as we proclaimed that we would, and here we are, pretty much right on time. It is a summer miracle.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ongoing summer miracle.
Hopefully.
Because this should be fine. My biggest problem, and I will tell you right now, if you're watching the video or if you're listening to the podcast and suddenly I angrily disappear,
Okay.
my 10-year-old son has zero ability not to fight with everybody in the house. Like, you cannot talk to that boy and not have him lose his mind. And it's just a developmental growing pains thing. It's fine. It's what it is. It's annoying. I've been through it with all three of my sons. It's just something that happens,
Yeah.
and he's just in the midst of it, and then being trapped in the house with us for the last 3-4 months.
That's tough
probably
on anybody at any age.
Hasn't helped much, so I told him that if I left this room to go fuss at him for being loud, he was the repercussions were going to be dire. So if I leave this room, just know that there's a 10-year-old boy crying somewhere in the near vicinity. You will probably hear it. And I'm sorry, I can't.
How's the cockroach situation?
Oh, okay. So after the first couple of days of us picking up the remnants, they seemed to have subsided, but
Good.
she's coming back 2 days from now
Also
to
good.
spray again. So there's going to be multiple sprays going on, but it wasn't. I thought it was going to be like a horror show in here. It's not quite that bad, but there may be like mounds of dead cockroaches behind my wall someplace. I don't know. But I can't believe I'm talking about this on this podcast. It's so gross, but it's just what it is. It's just what it is.
And your kitchen and bathroom are now reconstructed, usable, or
Oh no.
No?
No.
man.
No, you can't. I mean, and there's probably a lot of people out there listening to the podcast going, "Oh God, Rob, how naive!" And yes, I was as naive as you are. I was like, "So, you guys going to come in here and start doing?" Yep, we're going to start doing stuff. We can put you on the calendar in about 2 weeks, and it'll take us about a month to get it done. I'm like,
Yep.
yeah. So once
2-day
that
job.
starts, once that starts, once that starts, I don't know where we'll be as far as the podcast is concerned, but I am trying to get more. More strict about it. With everybody in the house being here all the time, I've always tried to be very conscientious of my family and making sure that I'm giving them the proper time. But now that I see them all the damn time, they can give up a couple hours of their time so I could do a podcast when I want to do the podcast, not when it's convenient for them. So I will say that we are heavily discussing in this family watching the Marvel movies in chronological order,
Sure.
not the order they came out, but order in time.
Yeah.
So starting with the first Avenger and then going to Captain Marvel, and as you go through time. I have some friends that are doing it, and they're just raving about it.
Oh,
They just
okay.
love it. And the big thing is that my friend, who is not nearly the geek I am, but has watched a lot of the movies and just sort of like, yeah, that was fun, but didn't really understand what was going on. He's loving it, but his wife is also loving it because she's like able to connect the dots through all these different things that are happening throughout these different movies. So she's feeling a lot more connected.
Well, the problem is where to slot in Spider-Man Homecoming, because they dated it incorrectly in the movie itself. So that's the one challenge.
Yeah, Homecoming is the last one, right?
No, that was the first solo Spider-Man movie within the MCU.
I don't know where they put that. I have the list in the other room, but I'm not.
No, in the movie itself, they dated it in a way that doesn't line up chronologically with all the other events. So
I believe that in the article that I read that gave me the list, there was a discussion of that.
There
but
probably
was.
was.
I didn't really.
Anybody who is going to the extent of writing an article of how to watch the MCU chronologically, I'm sure has thought about it.
Right. All right, well, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. That is the primary, best, and sometimes exclusive way to get your question on this podcast. You can also go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, usually through Facebook, if you hit us up there, we will answer you. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make it on the podcast. So if you want your question on the podcast and it's a longer question, those are the ones that go on the podcast. If you just want to say, do I buy this one or this one, Rob will probably tell you which one to buy.
Thanks for always promising I'll do that. That's
I didn't say that you would. I said that Rob might.
You said probably.
He does it for me.
Probably means more than half the time.
All right, so probably he won't because he hates all of you.
I'll try. I'll do what I can when I can. That's all I can say.
That's fine. And but doesn't mean it's gonna. The longer questions, the ones that you really want answered, in detail, and you want to know all the deets behind them, don't tweet us because that's not a good format for that. Send it to question@avrant.com. Rob's youtube.com/avrant for our AVRant podcast for our YouTube channel.
Not just AVRant at YouTube. That's the only one that's only AVRant. After
only
the slash.
AVRant. Okay.
YouTube.com/AVRant.
I'm over talking. I need the dust in here. Man, these lights really show everything.
It's like when the sunlight comes in at the right angle, hits
you're
everything.
Like,
you're like, there is dust there.
Look at all this dust in here. This is terrible. Well, it doesn't help that the bathroom that got demolished is on the just one door away. Yeah, so there's a fine layer of dust on everything in here, and that's after we have dusted in here at least 3 separate occasions. I keep sending the kids back here, like after every podcast, I'm like, grab that Swiffer and thingy and dust everything, and they do, but oh yeah,
gonna have to buy one of those portable HEPAs and move it around.
I probably should, but I'm not going to. All right. Contact us directly, rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm Tom @avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, which will take you to a PayPal donation site. There you can use your PayPal account or a credit card to send some money our way. So we want to thank Derek and Manuel.
Probably Manuel. Probably.
I think it's probably Manuel.
Yeah.
Anyways, Derek and Manuel for doing that this week. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Indeed, Derek and Manuel, thank you very much for the donations. It's appreciated.
Well, also, if you prefer, you can go to patreon.com and become a sustaining subscriber to our podcast. You sustain us by monthly. Patreon will take some money from you and give it to us, a minimum of $1, maximum of infinity. So we want to thank our 121 patrons over at patreon.com. Oh, I'm sorry, 121, up from last episode.
I know. I was definitely expecting that after the prize draw was done that the number would go down. I had fully prepared myself for that. Instead, It went up by 1. So very much.
I actually read it in reverse, and I was about to blame Scott for dropping out after winning, but I guess not.
Big time thanks to our 121 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Now that I've said that, I might have reminded some people, and next week maybe they'll drop off. But hopefully not.
Please don't.
I'd love to keep it above 120 because it's great if the number keeps going up.
We like the number going up. That's right. It helps us. It helps us do all the things that we need to do. We also want to thank some people that sent us some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. That includes Bob, Ari, Greg, Nathan, who says last week's crack up when Turned Toast name was drawn again forced him to pause the podcast from laughing. Yeah.
Me too.
I could not believe that we drew the same dude twice for the exact same contest. I'm like, I remember looking at it going,
yeah,
isn't that?
It can't be.
Isn't that the same guy?
You have that moment of disbelief.
So that was a Nathan, and there was another Nathan, and a Rob, not you, different Rob, and a Joe. So thank all of you for thanking us for keeping the podcast going.
Indeed. I'll say the names once more. Bob, Ari, Greg, Nathan, the other Nathan, Rob, and Joe. We really appreciate getting those notes. It's highly encouraging, so that's really nice to see and hear these days.
If you're watching us on YouTube and you see my face right now, my wife made the coffee, and it smells weird.
Oh.
So.
All right. Tastes weird?
It's probably not arsenic.
Probably not.
I should check to see if she upped my life
Fancy
insurance.
Water.
Not around here. So, lastly, we want to thank Andrew for supplying the model for our contest of last week. We did contact the winner, Scott.
Yes.
And Scott and Andrew are now in contact with each other, and we'll be sorting that out.
Yeah,
so,
Andrew let me know that it worked out swimmingly because Scott selected. I don't know how many models Andrew put on the list, but he said that Scott selected the one that he was hoping to build anyway. So it all worked out perfectly.
Yeah. All right. Well, congratulations, Scott, and thank you again, Andrew. In the news here, Denon announced their 2020 X series of receivers. The X2700, it's $850. The 3700, $1,200. The 4700, $1,700, and the 6700 is $2,500. The big headline is that these are the first officially announced receiver models with HDMI 2.1, but there's a catch. There is only one HDMI 2.1 input, so you can't use these receivers as an HDMI 2.1 switch, and that lone input is limited to 40 gigabits per second. Phil Jones made the rounds on various YouTube channels to try to explain that 40 gigabits is enough to handle 4K 120 at 10-bit 444 or 8K 60 at 10-bit 420, which is most any current display can do anyways. So basically, a stopgap year as far as HDMI 2.1 goes, but there are other exciting features that have been added. Let's stop right there for just a second and talk about this. If you have been in this game as long as I have, this is the least surprising thing that has ever been announced in home theater and AV. Every time they come out with a brand new standard like HDMI 2.1 or 2.0 or 1.4 or whatever, the first thing that happens is they rush to get it into the receivers as fast as they can. What does this mean? There's a limited number of physical inputs, or boards that they can buy or create to put in there fast enough. So the first thing they do is they'll put in one, so they have access to it and they can tout that they have it. And then the next year, you may see half of them, or maybe all the way up to all of them being HDMI 2.1 with the full bandwidth. But this is not at all surprising. We're going to see this with multiple receiver manufacturers as they come out. If they announce something new for 2020, I wouldn't be surprised if all of them are touting one or maybe two HDMI 2.1 inputs with limited bandwidth.
Yeah, it's not shocking, although I will fully say I'm a little bit disappointed that there's literally only one HDMI.
I remember that happening with HDMI, with one of the earlier versions of HDMI when it came out with one. We were all like,
I'm just like, it's not even a switch. So to me, that was a little bit surprising. I didn't think they'd quite go that sparse. The 40 gigabyte thing, frankly, when LG announced that this year's OLEDs only have 40 gigabytes bandwidth, I'm like, that's actually fine, because in terms of what that panel can display to you, 40 gigabytes is sufficient. It's 4K at 120 hertz. It's not an 8K panel in there at 10-bit color depth, which is what those panels are. I'm like, yes, the 2019s could actually accept a 12-bit signal, but it would just get down converted to 10 bits anyway. So on the televisions, I didn't give them much flack for that, because I'm like, this is literally what the TV can do, so okay. But on the receivers, it's like people tend to keep their receivers for several years, especially if you're getting like the 6700, $2,500 receiver or something. You're not going to expect to upgrade that next year if you buy it this year. And as soon as somebody tries to go 144 hertz because they're a PC gamer, or they actually try to go to a 12-bit signal or something like that, they're going to blow right through that 40 gigabyte or gigabit ceiling. And it's like, so my personal thing is, this is like, as far as the HDMI 2.1 goes, to me, it's the stopgap. It's kind of there, but if you're going to buy one of these receivers, buy it for one of the features we're about to talk about, not the 2.1.
Right, I agree. I mean, this is not the year to buy a receiver because it has HDMI 2.1.
And rumors are that the Yamahas that were kind of leaked early, they haven't been officially announced, that they're in the same situation, because apparently this is the chip that is out there, and it only does one HDMI 2.1 input, limited to 40 gigs.
So, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of very similar offerings coming out from other manufacturers, because they have to sell you, they have to give you something that you're excited about. Yeah. And Denon, Yamaha, Onkyo, they're all known for trying as soon as they can to get these features to you. I mean, it's what sells the box.
As we heard, this was being planned out 2 years ago, not yesterday. Right. So that's how this happens sometimes.
Right. And then you factor in the fact that, manufacturing in China, which is almost certainly where all these things come from, was shut down for months and months, and is only now starting to come back, I think. Yeah, they may have planned to have a lot more inputs than this, but, this is what's available. This is what they can get. Yeah. This is what they can do. Okay, but they have added some other features. Okay, so 2 preset modes allow you to store 2 completely different configurations, including 2 separate runs of Odyssey, and instantly switch between them with a single button press.
So that's cool. That's a feature that people have definitely been requesting, and if not requesting, asking about. Yamaha has had that in their receivers for a while, 2 different presets, but now Denon and, well, presumably Marantz, once they get announced, will have that as well. Yeah.
So all of the models have a full set of pre-outs, the 3700 and up. They get an optional preamp mode that completely disconnects the internal amps. It's all or nothing, though. If you want to use some of the internal amps, you cannot disconnect individual amp channels. So this means that you can now, going forward, take this receiver and say, okay, well, I'm going to buy this receiver now because, you know, I need a new receiver and I want some of these features. But once they come out with the receivers that have all the HDMI 2. Whatever that I need, I can now turn this into a dumb amp with a button press.
Yeah. Although they don't. Yeah, they don't have 7.1 analog ins.
They just have the outs.
Yeah. But the idea is, so previously in Denon's lineup, the 8500 flagship was the only one where you could actually turn the internal amps completely off and just use it strictly as a pre-pro. Now you can do that with the 3700, 4700, and 6700.
That's just smart.
Yeah,
that's just smart. There's just more fuel to the fire that you can use. And we've been saying you can use a receiver as a pre-pro since forever. Now this takes away one of those arguments. Well, see, the amps in there somehow.
Gene over at Audioholics, he's been measuring these things, of course, and he found that once you go above 1.2 volts coming out of the pre-outs, that you started to see higher distortion in the receivers than you did in the dedicated, like Marantz Pre-Pro, for example. And once you got above 1.5, then it started to get into what might become audible territory. And the reason that he tracked down is because the amps still being connected, even though there weren't speakers connected to those amplifiers, just the internal amps still being internally connected, there was some little bit of residual noise that was, you know, making its way back, because it's like a two-way thing. The signal doesn't only flow in one direction. So yeah, he's like, okay, now they're just like completely disconnected, and he makes prettier measurements. Gene is happy.
Yeah, good. There's an HDMI cable diagnostic tool on board that lets you test HDMI cable bandwidth and see how much your HDMI cables can handle, up to a maximum of 40 gigabits per second, of course, which is nice.
Yeah.
If you have plugged it in and your display isn't working, and your in-wall HDMI cable, you can use your receiver to diagnose the fact that indeed you need a new cable.
Yep.
So you can play full immersive audio formats in the main zone while playing the same source out of zone 2. You set zone 2 to source, and the receivers will automatically create a two-channel down mix for zone 2 while leaving the main zone fully operational. If you want to play a different source in zone 2, that still needs to come out of the source device as a 2-channel signal, but HDMI and digital connections are supported on all the new models. They all get Bluetooth headphone support too, so Bluetooth in and out, which is convenient.
Yeah. I mean, this is a feature that we've wanted to see, so happy to see it. It actually did exist in the X3600H in Denon's lineup from 2019, but that was the sole model in all of Denon's lineup that had this main zone continues to play in full surround sound or immersive audio while creating a 2-channel downmix of that very same source for zone 2. So good that it can do that. It also does work out of HEOS. Phil Jones confirmed that, so you can do the same thing. But the weird thing is you can't send a surround sound signal to just zone 2 all by itself while the main zone plays a completely different source. So it's only if the main zone and the zone 2 are playing the exact same source, but at least it can do it now. This is something Yamaha has been able to do for years, and Denon has finally caught up on that front.
So the 2700H tops out at 7 speakers. The 3700H can process 11 speakers with 9 amps built in, and it has IMAX Enhanced, which you should turn off unless they fixed it, which I don't think they have.
Well, you can manually arrange a lot of the bass management in IMAX Enhanced now, so it's okay. By default, it's not great settings, but you can manually override a lot of that in IMAX Enhanced.
Or you can just turn it off. The 4700H adds Oro 3D, and the 6700H gets a big upgrade this year. It can process 13 speakers, 11 amps built in, and it's the first receiver with official DTS-X Pro support. That has to be added via future firmware update, though, so believe it when you see it. So 13 speaker processing means the return of front wides. You can also configure a full 13 speaker or a 3D setup with the center height and voice of God. Positions, DTS-X Pro can also use those Aura 3D speaker positions if and when it gets added. So, yay.
Yes, the configurations that... DTS-X Pro. Like I say, I will believe it when I see it because DTS in recent years has been notorious for being very slow in getting the updates that they have promised actually out to market. But the idea of DTS-X Pro is that they're trying to catch up a bit with what Dolby Atmos has been able to do from the beginning. Dolby Atmos from the beginning, if you had enough channels in your processor, could do up to 24.1.10. You could have 34 speakers and one subwoofer channel, or a low-frequency effects channel specifically. DTS-X Pro goes up to 30.2. So not quite 34 speakers, but it can go up to 30 speakers. Supposedly there are 2 actual separate low-frequency effects channels. No idea how that's really going to work or why they would ever be different. But it's not that you take 30 of the Dolby Atmos positions and 4 of the Dolby Atmos positions are missing. There are like 4 speaker positions in the DTS-X Pro scheme that don't exist in the Dolby Atmos scheme. Basically right down the middle. There's a center height that you can use. There's actually a center bottom that you can use in DTS-X Pro. And then...
So on the floor, somebody was talking about
that's right.
on the floor recently.
And then the directly overhead voice of God and a center rear height, which doesn't exist in the Dolby Atmos scheme. So right straight down the middle of your room, overhead and below you, there are 4 positions that DTS-X Pro could potentially make use of, and then some of the other positions that Dolby Atmos allows for aren't in the DTS-X Pro scheme. But anyway, the 6700 will allow you to use 13 of those speakers, and when DTS-X Pro arrives, you'll actually be able to do more than 11 speakers for the DTS side of things.
All right, some what are these? Some comments? Comments. Alex says the Xbox One's Disney Plus app supports Atmos audio now. I 100% believe that, even though I don't know for sure because I've enabled Atmos and I was noticing we were watching the new Maleficent movie was on DTS. I mean on Disney Plus, and we watched that Sunday with my family, with most of my family at least, and I was noticing many overhead effects in that movie, and God, the Maleficent movies are so good. They're really good. The first one, I didn't like the Stefan, the bad guy, as much because he was a little, paper cutout person, not very interesting. Michelle Pfeiffer was much better in the second movie, I thought. So,
well, Disney Plus has been adding Atmos support to a lot of their apps. It began with only the Apple TV 4K, but in the past month or so, they've added that support to a lot of their other devices that can play Disney Plus. So good to hear, and that's good news.
Damien emailed Mile Price a while back regarding their in-ceiling backer box options, and even though it's not stated clearly on their website at all, the Alpha Series metal back cans can fit both the 8 and the 6.5 inch Alpha Series in-ceiling speakers. So there's a little touch of information.
Yeah, straight from the horse's mouth. So I was going by what was stated on the website, that it was only for the 8-inch size, but he called them directly or emailed them directly and got the good word that those backer boxes will work for both sizes, the 8-inch and the 6.5. So that's good to know. The Alpha Series over at Monoprice.
Nathan thought we might get a chuckle. We've been talking about outdoor and Bluetooth speakers lately. He has 2 UE Boom Bluetooth speakers. It's possible to pair them together as a stereo pair. Very important for the stereo imaging of his camping setup, right? So they're on top of... It took me forever to see these speakers, but they're on top of a wooden fence.
That's right.
And he's got them out in the middle of...
that is a wide open field, and I guess if you were quite close, you would hear left-right separation. Doesn't look like he's that close listening to these. I'm betting they sort of blend.
Maybe he's sitting on the fence.
That's good.
Anyway, so yeah. Joe wanted to share what he's done while being stuck at home in quarantine. So this is, if you have life goals of making your home theater better, let's see what Joe has done to make his better. He re-racked all of his gear, removed some unused components, which freed up space to put in all 3 generations of Xbox consoles. The heat. Oh, the heat.
I knew you were going to say that. And he has put the Xbox consoles towards the bottom of his rack, not the very bottom, because he's got his power conditioning at the very bottom. But the Xboxes they're basically in the middle. And then he's got a beautiful looking stack of Marantz gear, because he's got the Marantz Pre-Pro and then 2 of their amplifiers. They're all up at the top. So what they're drawing in is some hot air whenever an Xbox is turned on below down there. But hopefully it's all right.
I hope so. It's just the smelling of cooking capacitors, just not something I want to smell in the morning. He then sold his SVS SB13 Ultra and HSU VTF 15 Mark II.
He sold his PB13 Ultra.
I'm sorry, PB13 Ultra, so the big one, and replaced them with a pair of SVS SB16 Ultra subs that allowed him to retain huge bass output, but for much smaller boxes. Those complement his 13 Sonnet speakers, only 2 of which are visible, his front wides, which are on stands. Everything else, I guess, is in a wall or something.
So this is a very clean-looking theater, I must say.
Yeah, it's
We're
really
only seeing the
nice.
front, but the front looks very, very clean. I see 2 subs at the front and none at the back, though, so that concerns me, but oh well.
Hey, at least he vacuumed before he took the picture, so we can always say that.
Certainly looks like.
All right, let's get to some questions here. Nathan, he says, when it comes to projectors, it seems like the king in terms of performance is JVC, and then the next rung down is the Epson 5050 UB. What's the next rung down in price after that, if you still need lots of lens shift and zoom range? I want to say it's going to be another Epson, but I imagine BenQ should be in there as well someplace. But let's see what Rob says.
It's the lots of lens shift and zoom range thing that sort of knocks BenQ out. What's nice is that in their lower cost DLP projectors, they have some lens shift, typically only vertical, but even some is a lot more than most other DLP projectors. But no, if you need a good amount of lens shift and zoom range, then it is still going to be Epson. Now, you sort of have a choice here, because on the one hand, you can keep motorized zoom and motorized lens shift if you step down to the Epson Home Cinema 4010. Now that's $1,800, so it's about $1,000 less than the 5050 UB. Everything is motorized and it still has the huge lens shift range, 96% vertical and 47% horizontal of the size of the image that you're casting can be shifted vertically or horizontally respectively, and a 2.1 to 1 zoom ratio, so a huge amount of latitude and all powered. But with the 4010, if you're putting in a 4K signal, you are limited to 24 or 30 frames per second if that signal is HDR. It cannot do 4K 60 with HDR, which for gamers is an important thing because they're going to want to be able to input 4K 60 with HDR, and the 4010 can't do it. So there's actually a model just below it in the lineup that can do 4K 60 with HDR. It's the Home Cinema 3800. Now there, the performance is actually quite similar. Like I say, it can do the 4K 60 with HDR, but now all the lens adjustments are manual, not powered anymore. The price goes down to $1,400, so it's pretty attractive, and the amount of lens shift drops to 60% vertical, 25% horizontal, and the zoom range goes down to a 1.6 to 1 zoom ratio instead of 2.1 to 1. So some sacrifices there, but the price goes down too, and you get 4K 60.
All right. What if he wants the best black levels and contrast, closer to a 5050 UB in 1080p with no 4K support? And I'm sorry, 1080p with no 4K support is perfectly fine. So what if you wanted black levels in contrast and it doesn't care about 4K? You'd have to get something older, right? I mean, basically.
Yeah, so I mean, if you can find like one of the refurbished 5040 UBs, of course, that would get your price down to about, I think about $1,300 is what the refurbished 5040 UBs are going for these days. So that would be an easy choice. Although again, please be aware that the 5040 UB cannot do 4K 60 with HDR, but he was saying, hey, if 1080p is all I want to do, well then obviously that point is moot. But if you want to get a brand new projector that hasn't been refurbished and can give you similar quality but is 1080p only, I would point you at Sony's HW45ES. You can find those going for about $1,700, so it's actually more expensive than the Epson 3800, but less expensive than the 4010 from Epson. And there it has pretty big lens shift range, 71% vertical, 25% horizontal, and a 1.6 times zoom as well, all manual adjustments. So pretty close in terms of lens shift and zoom range, and it being manual to that Epson 3800, which is actually a little cheaper, but it does have superior black levels in contrast from the Sony, although it's 1080p only.
Lastly, he asks, Anthem has some instructions in their manual for how to adjust the phase setting on multiple subwoofers. It almost seems too easy. Would it work? Is it plausible? So this is the instructions Anthem has. To fine-tune the level or phase of each sub relative to each other, the level or the phase. Okay,
that's the words. That's the exact quote out of the manual. So
this is not just phase. This is also to level match them. He said, listen to the FM shh noise through the subwoofers only. Turn off main amplifiers. And adjust, or better yet, have someone else adjust the sub's level and or phase control until bass is loudest in the listening area. That's just ludicrous.
That is very wrong. That is not what you want to do.
I just can't imagine how. I don't know who wrote that. What's the thought process behind it?
Well, similar to do a sub crawl, put on some bass thumping music, and put it where it sounds loudest. That is advice that is also out there and is also wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the shh sound doesn't have a ton of bass in it
to
begin with, I wouldn't think. So I'm like, what is the subwoofer actually going to be playing?
And
just
why
like
the FM
the lower harmonics?
Why not
why
just,
loudest?
Why not just the test? Well, I guess you can't do the test tone out of the receiver itself simply because that isn't playing both subs at the same time unless you've connected them in mono. Right. So I guess that's the reason they didn't say just use that test tone. But no, I mean, that is having you adjust it by ear or maybe by SPL meter, not by say.
It doesn't sound like they wanted SPL meter on that.
And they're not talking about like
here.
running it through an FFT or even an RTA, a real-time analyzer. Like neither of they're not talking about measuring it like that. So you're hearing or sound pressure level measuring all of the frequencies simultaneously. So just because it sounds louder, like that could be one or two particular frequencies that are much, much louder than all the others. And that's the reason it sounds loud with that particular phase setting, which you wouldn't want to do. Obviously, we don't want to just make one or two particular frequencies exceedingly loud out of the whole range, and this wouldn't allow you to tell whether that's the case or whether all of it is equally loud. So no, this is not a good way to do this at all. I will refer you to my 12-step guide, which is tedious and excruciating, but will actually get you good results.
And I will refer you to place them across the room from each other, letting the
and leaving it alone,
level matching them with either using an SPL meter or using the receiver to do it for you, and then walking away after you run Odyssey or YPOW or whatever one you're using. Dean, different question, different person. Dean, several weeks ago, Dean wrote us about potentially replacing his Pioneer receiver from 2014, mainly because of its horrible user interface that his family struggled to use. Tom suggested just getting a Harmony remote instead of a whole new receiver within Dean's $500 budget. So he went big and got the Harmony Elite. His wife loves it, and he's impressed with how it just works. So he says, huge thanks for that. You're welcome. I love being right. It's happened so infrequently in my life that I have to take the win when I get it. But he did have it in mind that it could have just been a good excuse to get a new receiver with all the latest features. Again, Tom was right on that. His Pioneer only has HDCP 1.4, so even though it says it can do 4K pass-through, he's only actually getting 1080p to a Samsung Q70 QLED. So he looked at the Denon 3700H we suggested, but it was out of stock when he looked at. Then an X2700H was available, though, but he knows something about its HDCP spec. The 2600 says it has HDCP 2.3. Meanwhile, his Samsung and Roku say they have HDCP 2.2. Do the numbers all need to match? Can we explain what HDCP numbers mean and what works with what? As long as, well, the lowest one will be the one that will be the limiter, but the higher ones will always work with the lower ones. So
yeah, the higher HDCP number is backwards compatible with all numbers below it. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just the HDCP is high definition copy protection. It's just a handshake that they make between the different devices that say, yes, you are an actual compatible device. This is what I can do. This is what you can do. Let's see what we can do. And this is supposed to stop people from being able to remember how you could like take your VCR and then plug it into another VCR and then plug that into your TV and then record through, the VCR record what was on your cable box or what was on the other VCR or whatever. You could record what was being played through it. That's to stop. That's what HDCP is supposed to do. Stop pirating.
Yeah, because there are people out there who think that the way people pirate digital content is by playing it in real time out of an HDMI connection and recording that, which I don't think anyone has ever done. I don't see any reason why. But can you imagine? I was gonna pirate Endgame, but it's like almost 3 hours each time, and people tend to just copy the digital file in the computer in some other way, as opposed to playing it in real time and recording it onto a tape. But anyway, yes, HDCP is there. So yeah, 2.3. That's the thing that's coming along with HDMI 2.1 for 8K resolution and for next gen TV ATSC 3.0. Those things are using HDCP 2.3. So it's nice that your 2600 will be able to handle, say, a next-gen TV tuner that uses HDCP 2.3. It's ready for that. But with your television and your Roku handling HDCP 2.2, which was the HDMI 2.1 copy protection standard, those will work just fine with the receiver having 2.3. The 2.3 is backwards compatible with all the lower numbers.
Yes. There's a strange thing in my coffee. Sorry. I'm trying to get it out without... I don't have a napkin, so I can't...
Coffee cast. Hit the mic with your coffee. Nice.
Don't worry about it. This is important stuff. Dean understands.
Good pod. Not so great coffee, but great pod.
There we go. Dean's father-in-law is hard of hearing. What? So when... Sorry. I always want to say one of my proudest moments as a human being is I was driving by with my wife before we had kids. I believe it's in St. Augustine, we must have had Noah by then, so my oldest. But we were driving by the school for the deaf and blind, and as we were driving by, my wife said, "Oh, look, it's the school for the deaf and blind." I said, "Where?" She said, "Right there." I said, "What?" She said, "The school for the deaf and blind." I'm like, and I just sat there waiting until she got it. But it's a terrible, terrible dad joke, but I just nailed it so good that I still laugh about it today. Anywho, Dean's father, I'm not making fun of your father-in-law, sorry. Dean's father-in-law is hard of hearing, so when they watch movies together, he uses a pair of wireless Sennheiser RS120 headphones and was able to connect the Sennheiser transmitter to the stereo analog tape out on his old receiver, but it appears that new receiver models no longer have a tape out connection. Who would have thought, since, tapes don't exist anymore. Dean has noticed that the newest Denon and Marantz models now offer Bluetooth headphone output, but Dean's father-in-law already likes the Sennheiser headphones and isn't keen to change to anything new. I'm sorry. Does your father-in-law know my father? Because he is also not keen to change to anything new.
Pretty common.
No, thank you. It seems to be a thing that fathers and father-in-laws seem to be catching and spreading among each other like a virus. So could he plug the Sennheiser transmitter into Zone 2 output while retaining 7.2 audio from the speakers? How did they make this work? Well, clearly the new Denon receivers that Rob just mentioned can do exactly that.
The newest ones and the existing 3600H could do it in Denon's lineup, but he was looking at models that cost less than that.
Right.
So one option would be to perhaps wait for the 2700H, although that one isn't coming out until August, so a little bit of wait on that, and you won't have the discounted price on that right away because that's going to be a brand new model. So over in Marantz's lineup, the sister company to Denon, the models that they brought out in 2019 had the feature where you could have full surround sound going in the main zone, and then if you set Zone 2 to source so that it is playing the same thing as what the main zone is playing, it would retain full surround sound in the main zone while giving you a downmix 2-channel version for the Zone 2 output. So your least expensive option that you can buy right now today would be Marantz's SR5014. The 5014 will let you do that. That one does have that feature. Now, you could also go over to Yamaha, because Yamaha has done this for years, and pretty much all of their 7-channel or higher receivers, which is almost all of them, will allow you to do this as well. So those are your best options there.
I mean, you could also just get Bluetooth headphones for this.
You could also just get some Bluetooth headphones. I mean, Sennheiser makes Bluetooth headphones. So
I was going to say, I mean, it would be very easy to say, look how these look exactly like the ones you currently have, except that they work with this, this new TV, new receiver or whatever. I mean, it's almost like you could probably switch them out on them and not. He would.
You know what though? I did see in some of the manuals that if you're using the Bluetooth headphone out, it does automatically kick you into stereo listening mode.
Oh, that would.
So that was not what he wanted, because he wanted to retain full surround sound, while the headphones, of course, are getting 2 channels. So that might not
what about
be
using the pre-outs. Is that even an option?
But then he'd only get the front, left, right. And most of the dialogue's going to be in the center channel, right? So.
Oh yeah, when the matrix is across. That's right. Okay.
So you do need a 2-channel down mix. So you kind of need to look for that feature, the 2-channel down mix. So yeah, like I say, the best.
I would go Yamaha here.
Yeah, probably going Yamaha would be the cheapest, easiest solution. Although the SR5014 from Marantz is a great receiver that you could buy right now, or you could wait for the 2700.
Brian has a large 700 square foot screened-in porch. There are no windows. The see-through parts are all screen door material, so air can freely move through 2.5 of the walls. And if the wind is really blowing, some precipitation can come in too. But the ceiling is solid, and the screen door material keeps out most light rainfall, so there's fairly good protection from the elements. Brian and his family spent about half of the year using this outdoor space for watching movies, and they really enjoyed the experience. He used to have a 65-inch TV, but somebody managed to damage it. Do my children, have they visited you?
He's got kids.
I scrubbed the kitchen down, scrubbed it down. I mean, it was immaculate, and I was telling my wife how happy I was about how clean the kitchen was, and as I was saying it, my 14-year-old son knocked over a full Sam-sized thing of oil.
Nice.
And just
oil
broke the jar
easiest
everywhere.
thing to clean up, I'm sure.
I was like, and this is why we can't have nice things. Anyways, somebody managed to damage it, so it's a 55-inch out there right now, which is way too small with the main seats about 16 feet away. 65 inches and marginally large enough. When he had it even bigger would be better. And he has an SVS Prime Satellite 5.1 package with the included SB1000 sub, even with them mounted up high and angled downwards and powered by a modest Yamaha RX V681. They sound quite all right. So these are all outside already. So this is a very large space.
It's quite a large space.
It's quite. So think of like an A-frame house. This is, it goes all the way up to the top of the A-frame. So this is a very large area.
And acoustically speaking, it's wide open, because what looks like it might be glass, no, that's just screen door material. It's completely open. So acoustically,
and all the speakers, the elevation speakers are above any of the screen doors. So the wind would have to blow the air, the rain in and then up to get to him. Now humidity and stuff, I have no idea where he lives. So, but clearly he thinks this is okay, and I'm sure he talked with SVS about it. So he's got the rear speakers, the side speakers, side surrounds are all the way at the back of the room, which is fine, and out. But the front speakers are at the right at the front, and the TV is a little bit offset to the left because of how the screen door material works.
That's right.
And his children have no faces.
Well, I put in the blue dots because I didn't know if he wants people's faces exposed. So just to be safe, everybody's face is covered up.
I just want to say that seeing your children sit like that reminds me of my 16-year-old son, who sits in such a way as that I think it causes me some sort of lower back trauma. He actually sits his bottom onto the ottoman, and then he has his head propped up against the couch. So he's kind of, and there's that dip in his lower back. It's very painful to look at, but here we are. So Brian wants some improvements. Obviously, this is not an enclosed space, acoustically speaking, and the solid surfaces are all hard, flat, and highly reflective. Even though the SVS Prime satellites are impressive for their size and price, dialogue intelligibility is not excellent. Would it be helpful to add an outdoor carpet in front of the seats? Anything else that could be done to improve the acoustics? Well, there's not. I mean, as reflections go, there's not much to worry about here, because even your first reflection off the right wall is going to be going, kind of out the window, basically, literally. So would a carpet help?
It wouldn't hurt, but I don't know how much it would really be noticeable in terms of helping dialogue intelligibility.
I don't really see. I mean, and on top of that, you didn't have to worry about like moisture getting on the carpet, and it stinking and stuff like that. I don't see that this as being a hugely beneficial purchase. You know, there is no real ability, I think, to acoustically treat a room that has 2.5 walls that are open to the outside world. You know, all the sound is basically direct sound that you're getting, and it's just going straight out. Yeah, I mean, it's just
I mean, what reflections are there? They are coming off hard flat surface, but I mean, really, to me, honestly, my honest thought on this is that the only way to improve dialogue intelligibility in your current setup would be to lower that center speaker. Because I think that's most of it, is just that it's really up quite high and angled down, and I don't think you're getting the full direct sound from that center speaker where it's positioned currently. If you could maybe mount it just above the TV on the brick wall or just below the TV on the brick wall, I think that is your best bet at actually improving that side of things.
Yeah, you could lower that one down, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, though, honestly, I mean, if you look at the angle of the private elevation, it is sort of angled-ish. It looks from this vantage towards that couch, so it's not a terrible thing. If you were to lower that speaker down, it may be hitting the floor more than it's going to be, you know, at least with direct sound, line of sight sound from the tweeter. This is what, and then in a situation like this, I would be looking at a horn-loaded speaker, something that's a little bit more directivity, you know, where you could, and on a swivel mount, where you could actually aim it directly towards your. Now, if you're looking to upgrade speakers, we can help you with that, but that would be where I would be looking towards.
Like if you had come to us originally before already having purchased the speakers, I probably would have pointed you at like HSU. Because I think their speakers are around the same price, but they're a horn-loaded design, a little bit more efficient too, which might help you. Just sheer output might help you in this situation too.
Right.
So that probably would have been the choice there.
He could also just get it like a normal center channel speaker from SVS or whomever he wants, and just place that like on that wall, and then on some sort of swivel mount or maybe a shelf where he can use
even on
angle.
a stand below the TV is possible. Conceivable.
Yeah. So in terms of volume, the SVS speakers are fine, but he could use more bass output. He's not keen on trying to make dual subs happen, but with a PB2000, give him some more extra oomph over the SB1000. Absolutely. I almost said a bad word. Yes, it would.
It would.
Undeniably. Now, you are still trying to pressurize the earth.
So, you're not going to get that, but
you're never going to get that kick you in the chest feeling that you might get in the movie theater or something like that, but you should get considerably louder output.
I mean, the PB2000 will just play 6 decibels louder across everything, and then down at like 20 hertz, it's like 12 decibels louder than your SB1000. So, it'll.
I'm assuming you don't have neighbors. Just assume that there's nobody near you.
It'll give you some extra oomph. It's never gonna give you tactile rumble you bass because you just have an entire open volume of air. But it'll be an upgrade.
So the TV stays outside all year round. He can throw a cover over it so it doesn't get directly wet, but it isn't moving back and forth inside. He's looked at outdoor rated TVs and heard us mention that Samsung is getting into outdoor TVs, but given their high prices, he could literally buy a new 75-inch TCL 6 Series every year for the next 6 years for the same amount.
Yep.
Well, that's probably what's going to happen if you let your kids, if you trust your kids to put that cover on that thing, because that's what happens with me and my grill. I'm like, go put the cover on the grill. It's about to rain. Okay. You know, rain coming down, look outside, grill getting soaked. Thanks, guys. Nailed it. So given his setup, do we agree that it makes more sense to buy a normal indoor TV, fully understand that it might not live as long as if it were outside, and does a TCL 6 Series make sense as his top choice? I mean, yes, I guess. I mean, if you really want to go big, you could go a projector, hang a projector from the ceiling, and then throw that up on a retractable, even if it's like, well, no.
Well, they have that Carl's Place material, which is, I mean, it's essentially just mildew-resistant vinyl, but for an outdoor setup, it's fine. But he's got completely uncontrolled light in this situation.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, do you do this more normally at night or in the evenings and stuff like that? Because I do have a friend whose neighbor had a little porch set up like this, and it was a projector, and they were out there in the evenings all the time. So I mean, blinds, I mean, even like those little weird bamboo blinds that they hang outside all the time could be rolled, those roll down ones could be put in here to just sort of like take the direct light off of the screen.
It's never going to look
and
great
do it that way
until it's dark. But
right.
But yeah, if you are going with the flat panel TV, I think you're on the money here. Like you say, I mean, I think you'll get more than a single year's use out of 175-inch TCL, and maybe in 2 or 3 years you end up having to replace it, but you'll still be ahead dollar-wise. So, and yeah, the TCL 6 series, when you're looking for as inexpensive but not giving up very much at all in performance, that's a great choice. So I think you're on the money there.
Robert has a NAD T758, which can process 7.2.4, but only has 7 amplifiers built in, so he needs 4 channels of external amplification. He has a Denon X4300H on hand, but it doesn't have 7.1 analog inputs. It only has several pair of stereo inputs. Can you somehow make this X4300H work as a 4-channel external amplifier?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
How?
It can power zone 2 and it can power zone 3. So you could actually have 6 if you wanted to. You could use it as a 6-channel amplifier. Yeah, so just take one of your pairs of pre-outs and plug it into any stereo input, the CD input or the Blu-ray input or whatever, and have that as your main zone playing in stereo. Direct, no trim level set, no distance level set, just a dumb amplifier, the master volume set to 0 dB, and then plug in your second pair of pre-outs from your NAD to another stereo input and have that power zone 2. And so in the Denon, you'll have to go into the amp assign, and the amp assign you'd want to use is at least the 7.1 plus 2 at zone 2 setting. I would probably set it to the 5.1 plus zone 2 plus zone 3 setting. And then if you ever want to power another pair of speakers, you could out of zone 3.
There you go. I didn't think about that. That's a good one. Mark has found himself spending more time in his home theater than usual these days, so he's considering some upgrades. Yeah, you and all the rest of the world right now.
Except for me. I'm spending less time in my home theater. It's a raw deal.
Yeah. I'm actually, Father's Day is coming up, and I haven't really angled for this yet with my family, but I want them to get me Shudder, that horror TV, that streaming service, because I watch a lot of scary, I like scary movies, and I'm pretty much running out of anything worthwhile to watch on Netflix, Hulu, or the other one, Prime. I watched Silence of the Lambs with one of my sons this weekend, and it was kind of nice. He was like, "What's that sound?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "That weird sound." And he goes, "Oh, it's a camera." Remember that taking pictures and it's a flash going off? Yeah. He had never... he had never heard like a flash charging back up before. It's crazy. So anyways, this is Mark upgrading his theater. He's got 5 B&W speakers with surrounds running in dipole mode and mounted quite high on his walls. They're powered by a Pioneer SC97 receiver, and he has a single HSU VTF-1 Mark II positioned behind his chair. So what upgrade will maximize his enhancement for movies like, say, 1917? I would like to see that movie. Should he expand to 5.1 to 7.1? No. Expand to Atmos? No. His Pioneer has 9 amps built in and can expand to 11 speakers. He's got some other speakers on hand, a pair of Andrew Jones bookshelves, and some Bose satellites. What do we say? This is a fisheye lens, I guess.
Well, it was like one of those 360-degree photos, so I just took screen grabs,
screenshots
in 4 positions to give you some idea of what we're dealing with. Now, I mean,
can we say room treatments? Because I can't. Oh, he's got some, or one. I see one.
Yeah. Over on the right side, he's got like a rug hanging on that side, so it's doing a little bit.
Well, there's one on the left side as well.
We don't know what's
behind the lamp.
Don't know what behind his curtain on the front wall. So there's
so you guys understand. It's red carpet, which is fine, and wood paneling, but not like the normal wood paneling. Like this looks like actual planks of wood that were built up vertically instead of horizontally, not vertically. So his walls are all this wood all the way around, so highly reflective. The ceiling also looks reflective with some exposed, I want to call them exposed beams. The ceiling's finished, but there's beams on top of it, wood beams on top of it. It's got a projector a projector set up with a screen up. It looks like a fixed frame screen up front, the center up below it, the left and rights flanking it, and then he's got one room treatment on each side wall to catch the first reflections, and that's it. There's a door at the back, so this does look enclosed, though there's a little bit of a hallway off to the rear.
There's doors
left
down
of this
there, though,
room.
so hopefully additional doors.
It all closes off.
So I mean, he was
and the
asking
surrounds
about
are to the left. It looks like behind and to the left and right of the couch, like on the ceiling practically. They're very,
mainly
very high.
because the right surround has to go above a window, so there's not
And
a
the other one
whole lot
matches.
of choice as far as that goes.
Right.
He did ask about maybe repositioning his surrounds, but I'm like, I don't know really how you do on that right hand side. I mean, other than moving it farther back, but then
Is that an AC unit on the right wall, right next to the speaker?
on the right hand wall.
Yeah, above the window, there's some box up there.
Oh,
and
I
wonder-
don't. It's got like
what that
writing
is.
on it. I don't know what that is.
maybe it's a sign. I don't know. I think maybe it's a picture. I think you're right. It just looks like a box because of the shadow. Okay. All right. Oh yeah, and there looks like a big heat thing on the right wall, on the floor, all the way across. So what would I do in here?
I mean, second sub is the thing that jumped out to me, but I mean, I don't know how much he's got quite a bit of
I can't even
seating.
see his
But
first sub. Oh, his first sub is in the back right corner. It looks like.
no, that's like a chair with some speakers. He said it's behind his seat, so there's not really a camera angle that shows that.
Oh, I don't see.
So that's where he said his first sub is. But I'm thinking second sub because he's got quite a few seats. So if you want better uniformity across your seats, second sub is the upgrade that I would go for in here. I think you could use more acoustic treatments.
Yes.
Because there's still quite a bit of bare and hard reflective space. I don't think more speakers in here is really going to be that much of an upgrade. I mean, if you want to experience some Atmos, I mean, he's got additional speakers on hand, and for Atmos speakers, yeah, the Andrew Jones bookshelf speakers would be more than fine if you want to throw up
Problem is
some
with your
heights or something.
side surrounds, you're going to either. I mean, I guess I would go top fronts, top
fronts,
rears.
sure.
That way you would physically distance your speakers. You couldn't go
Yeah.
top middles because they basically be on top of your surrounds.
Yeah,
They'd be
because
within a
his
couple of
receiver can
feet.
already do it, so it's not like he's having to buy a new receiver to do Atmos. So
Right, he doesn't need amplification though. So
no, because it's got 9
is-
amps built in, and he's only using
does it?
5 speakers right now. So, he
Yeah,
doesn't.
I mean,
have
you
to
could put
buy
those those bows and the Andrew Jones on your ceiling
Sure.
someplace. Front heights, no,
Top
fronts,
fronts, top rears.
But I think yes, acoustic treatments. I'm having a hard time. I'm assuming that hallway closes off and that it's negligible as far as room acoustics goes.
Mm-hmm.
You could take your current sub and put it in one of your front corners, probably your front left corner, and your rear sub put it in the back top, back right corner.
Yeah.
Probably would be the best way to go for that. But yes, more acoustic treatments would also make a big difference. So I guess I'm leaning towards the sub first, the acoustic treatment second, and if you want to play around with Atmos, I would not install anything permanently until you're absolutely sure you love
Sure.
it.
But since it basically doesn't cost him anything, you got the speakers on hand and the AV receiver already that can do it, then yeah, have some fun with that, sure.
Kevin. So Kevin was watching The Matrix on regular 1080p Blu-ray using the Sony CX960 Blu-ray player. If you pressed info on the for the Sony player, it would display the video bitrate. It never seemed to go higher than 27 megabits per second. Is that
Megabits per second,
right?
yes. That's what the info button said.
I haven't said that in megabits in a while. Gigabits has been everything. He's assuming the Ultra HD Blu-ray version would have a higher video bitrate, right? But 18 gigabits per second versus 27 megabits per second. It can't be that big of a difference, can
From
it?
mega to giga.
Yeah. What is he missing here? Is that info button video bitrate useless information, or can it actually be helpful in any way for letting users know if their HDMI cables have sufficient bandwidth? It can't help you with that.
It can't really help you with the HDMI cable bandwidth side, but what's going on here is it's showing you the bitrate that is coming off of the disc, and what is coming off of the disc is compressed video. So what happens is the video gets decompressed, it gets decoded and decompressed. What comes out of the HDMI connection is completely uncompressed video. Right. So that's the difference between your megabits per second, which is what's on the disc, versus the gigabits per second that are coming out of the HDMI connection. That's all the compression. So yeah, you're seeing the compressed bitrate that's coming off the disc. Now, the Ultra HD Blu-ray definitely will be a higher bitrate coming off the disc, but we're still in the megabits per second range. Typically, your Ultra HD Blu-rays at the lowest are going to be about 50, and at the highest can be over 100. Some of them will go up that high. Most are averaging about 60 to 70 megabits per second on Ultra HD Blu-rays these days. Some are a little lower, some are a little higher. But yeah, the gigabits per second thing is once that video has been completely decoded and decompressed, and that's what's going over the HDMI connection.
Ben asks, what is the recommended way to audition speakers? Should you listen to them with subwoofers on or off, room correction applied, size set to large or small, etc.? Well, that question really depends on the setting and what you're going for. So if you are in a showroom and you're auditioning speakers, what you want, in my opinion, what you want is the speakers, whatever ones you're auditioning to, especially if you're comparing them, to be set identically. So level matched. Okay. All speakers should be level matched. Okay. And they should be playing by themselves. So no subwoofers, nothing else. So that, of course, they would have to be set to large at that point. This would give you the best indication of what the speakers themselves can do. So then you would go A, B, C, or however many speakers you're listening to, all set to large, all level matched to the exact same level, no subwoofers, and just playing by themselves. Preferably co-located, which is awfully hard to do. But sometimes they have like turntables where you can just flip the speakers around.
That's if you're doing an A-B comparison. If you're just listening to one pair of speakers, then... But same thing. I would go no subwoofers.
But if you can't do that, then if you have speaker A, B, C, and on the other side you have A, B, C again, you could do all the A's on the outside, the B's on the inside, and the C's on inside that. But I don't think it matters a terrible amount. It just makes sure that you're acoustically getting a good stereo image from each of them.
Now, I will do something a little bit different when I'm evaluating, because the issue for me is that I don't care what the speakers I'm buying do as far as deep bass, because I am never going to try to run my speakers full range. And the problem is, if my speakers that I'm auditioning have been set to large and I'm not running subwoofers, even though I don't want to hear it, I can't turn my brain off from hearing bass, and it is going to affect my opinion of these speakers, whether I want to pay attention to it or not. There's just no way I can train my brain to completely ignore the bass that they're playing. So I will actually set my AV receiver or the AV receiver at the store to say that there is a subwoofer, although I don't connect one, and I will give the speakers a crossover. In fact, I will give them a higher than 80 hertz crossover, because at 80 hertz, the room is involved. So particularly at a store, I want to try and get the room out of it. So I might give them a 200 or even a 250 hertz crossover. This is me. This is my approach, because I basically want to ignore the bass coming from speakers, which I know is like the craziest, most opposite thing you might have ever heard, because most reviews, professional reviews, go on and on about how much bass these little bookshelf speakers have. I completely don't care. I don't want to even hear the bass, because I want to evaluate what I care about from the speakers, which is the mid-range and the treble. So I will typically, if I'm auditioning a speaker, not have a subwoofer, but I will have a crossover and a higher than usual crossover, and I will typically not have any room correction applied, because I want to hear what the speakers do on their own, and I'm not really in favor of trying to use EQ to make the high end of a speaker sound a certain way, because it's so directional up there that it's really difficult to effectively have that happen. So that's my approach.
So it becomes a completely different animal when you're doing in-home auditions.
Mm-hmm.
In-home auditions should be set up exactly the way that you would be utilizing the speaker. In this case, for me, I'm going with basically I set it up the exact same way as I would be listening to it if these were my only speakers. So that means subwoofer blended in, crossover where it should be, Odyssey run, everything. Because this is your actual room.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to take the room out of the equation because this is the room they will be in.
Is what
We're not trying to take the subwoofer out of the equation because this is the subwoofer they'll be playing with. You know, this is all the stuff. You can make the argument, and maybe if you were in a showroom, you could make the argument that you could cross each one of the speakers that you're auditioning into a subwoofer if it's the subwoofer you're going to buy. But then the room becomes, like Rob said,
part of it,
the room becomes a much bigger issue. I don't mind hearing the bass. To me, it doesn't bother me as much. I've heard enough speakers, and I don't sit there and go, "Wow, this is really look at all the detail here." I'm like, "Yeah, this is going to get fatiguing in about an hour." The bass is so impressive. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm never going to ever hear this," and it's so overpowering that clearly there's other issues going on with the speaker. A really good flat speaker you should be able to run it and kind of judge it. But Rob's right. Taking the bass out of the equation is not a bad way to do it. You are going to get people who are going to think you're an insane person while you're in the store doing this.
That is not the norm.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, depending on the store you go to, you end up getting some really weird problems that you won't expect. I went in there one time and took CDs to go audition some speakers, and they looked at me like,
we got no way to play this.
I'm like, what do you mean? Like, do you have some vinyl? I'm like, no, vinyl? You lost your mind? I want to hear the speakers sound good.
And one thing you might readily discover, which is what was certainly where the point I'm at in the home theater journey, is when you do start doing the home auditions with the type of setup that Tom described, you've integrated everything. It's your room, so you've got your subs going, you've run your room correction. You're going to start discovering that a lot of these speakers don't sound nearly as different as you might have anticipated once they're actually fully integrated into a treated, bass-managed, properly set up room. A lot of speakers are entirely capable and don't sound very different from each other at all in those circumstances.
Well, once you correct for any inconsistencies within the speaker itself with Odyssey and the room, you end up with a bunch of speakers. That's why we have like the set group of speakers that we recommend, and people are like, I like the ones this looks better than the other ones. I'm like, yeah, fine, whatever. I don't care.
Totally gonna be fine. We like speakers where we're confident that the speaker is not going to be an inherent problem in getting you to accurate sound. Where like these speakers, if you don't like the way it sounds, it's something else about the setup because they're just telling it like it is. That's the speakers we like.
Right. I mean, there is, like RBH is a perfect example. When you go from like the lower end RBHs, lower cost, I say end, but lower cost to the higher cost RBHs. As you go, the performance gets better. The low end performance gets better. The high end performance gets better. They just get better overall, and sometimes they get louder, and sometimes they get a bunch of other stuff too. But you're going up in performance. So, when somebody says comes to, I want a speakers $1,000 a pair, which should I buy? I'm like, it's just there's like Kef and Aperion and SVS and Sand. I mean, HSU's not even in there, except they're cheaper than that. But there's so many, and with the right room and following everything else. Now somebody comes to us and says, "Oh, I have this." Outdoor space with 2.5 walls missing. What speaker should I get? Well, suddenly. Then we come into that's a different question. But we're assuming when you're asking these questions, we're going to be able to also help you treat the room and get the room going as well as it can be. All right. Do we know any chart or formula that tells which thickness of acoustic panels treat which frequencies? What is the difference in performance when using an air gap versus filling the entire panel with insulation? Well, the kind of as far as the air gap part of it, if you have a 2-inch air gap with a 2-inch panel, it's the same as having a 4-inch panel that's right against the wall. Very close, yeah. It's very similar performance, and although that kind of continues on.
Not entirely, like if you had a 2-inch thick panel that's got 4 inches of airspace behind it, that isn't exactly the same as a 6-inch panel against the wall or a 4-inch panel with a 2-inch air gap. You're sort of looking in the 2 to 2.5-inch air gap space is where that amount of air more or less performs very similarly to if that were just filled in with insulation. More air than that doesn't tend to give you much difference versus if you had more insulation. So look for about 2 or a 2.5-inch air gap, which just logistically is easier to do most of the time too if you're actually building a frame. But in terms of, I don't have like a super duper easy chart, but if you just go over to GIK or Acoustimac, they have measurements for all of their panels. So you can just see on very nice chart that and it's very clear. They're like, here are the frequencies where it is clearly absorbing more, and here's where it drops off at the high end, and here's where it drops off at the low end.
And they're all using the same insulation.
That's
so
right.
It's pretty much all the same.
Yeah.
For each of these. And I've seen charts like this, and they'll tell you what they are. But places like GIK and Acoustimac and some of the other ones, you can just call them and say, I want to absorb this frequency.
Yeah.
I'm worried about this. What do I need? And they'll tell you. A few episodes back, we mentioned that the RBH Signature SV Reference speakers were RBH's attempt to add a character to their speakers. Did I be part of that?
I think that was me who said that. So these are the SV Reference are the ones that have the folded ribbon tweeter.
Okay.
And so I do believe I made a comment where I was like, that was them going for a little bit something different. They weren't going for like straight down the road, linearity, even dispersion in every direction. It was a little bit different.
So he asked if we could expand on that and compare them sonically to the regular Signature SV series. I don't know what they sound like. I've never heard them, so I couldn't compare them to each other. I would have a hard time, believing that RBH would sonically deviate that far.
Well, they're still linear as all get out.
Yeah, this is RBH is as consistent as can be when it comes to their sound.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pair any of their speakers with any other pair of their speakers, and the differences will be very minimal compared to all the similarities.
Now,
so I would have a hard time.
Primarily where the difference is measurable and audible in the right circumstances is the dispersion. The dispersion is different of those speakers. Pretty much all other RBH speakers are very wide, very even dispersion in all directions, whereas the reference series with the folded ribbon tweeter inherently just has narrower dispersion. So that's largely the difference that's happening there. So what it basically lets you do is as you change the toe in of most RBH speakers, the sound changes ridiculously little. They're one of those speakers where whether they're pointing straight out or pointing straight at you, very little difference in the sound, but not so much the case with the SV Reference series. Those ones, as you toe them in or change your height relative to the positioning of the tweeter, you could notice some differences in the timbre of the sound that way. So they're, in that sense, a little bit more picky about placement and how they're aimed at you. But in terms of frequency response in an on-axis sense and within the listening window, linear as all get out. So in that sense, they sound about the same.
Gurinder asks, any opinions on the Home Theater Gurus YouTube channel? I've never seen it.
So most of I haven't watched all of their videos by any means, but the ones that I have, I don't have any large disagreements. It does seem like there's one main guy who's talking over there, and he's largely sort of talking off the cuff. He's not scripted. And I think sometimes it would be beneficial if he were, because there's some meandering and there's some things where it's like he's just...
Meandering.
Yes.
Gosh,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
Sometimes he's just like misspeaking. Like he's not meaning to say something incorrectly. He's speaking off the cuff. So the exact words aren't always exactly right. So largely I think it's a pretty good resource. I don't have any huge disagreements over there. And that's my opinion.
All right, and I will point you towards Rob's opinion since I've never seen it, and nor am I likely to ever watch it. No offense, but no. So Gurinder's son walked behind one of his speakers, stepped on the speaker wire, and now that a banana plug is broken. Any way to fix it? So this banana plug looks like a compression type, I think. It's hard to see.
I don't think it's a locking It's not a locking style.
It's not locking, but it looks like compression, right? You stick it in there.
Yeah,
and
what is the
compresses.
name for those? The something BT, WBT, or there's a name for that type of plug. But yeah, one of them is snapped.
Yes, and it's very broken.
Oh,
it's not a little broken.
It's off.
It's like the part that you stick into the banana plug part is gone.
Yes.
So the only way to fix this is to buy a new one and replace it.
That's a replacement, not a fix. Yeah.
There's no fix there. I don't even think. I guess if you knew how to
weld
or solder or something,
maybe.
I guess you could. It seems like a more trouble than it's worth.
Also, I'm not confident that if you were to weld it there, that the bump of the welding would prevent that from going in smoothly now. So no, that's a replacement.
So he already has a drop tile ceiling. He can hear footfall noise, more like kids jumping noise, to be honest, coming from upstairs. Is there a quick and easy fix? Yes. It's called go up there with a belt in hand and say, "Who's jumping up here?" That's my fix.
All right.
So this is so what you're thinking is they're jumping. The noise is going through the ceiling and then into your room and down. So is there something you could put between your drop tile ceiling and the ceiling that would stop that from happening? But that's a fallacy. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
What's happening is they're jumping and it's shaking the beams and all the structure, and the structure is shaking the structure within your home theater. So therefore the sound is transmitting through the walls and the ceiling and everything else into your room. So is there any way to stop it easily and quickly? It's buy a belt and get strict. Now, I do not advocate hitting your children. I have never hit my kids. I'm not about to, though I have thought about it recently. but I do not advocate that. But yes, there is no quick and easy fix.
No, not quick and easy. The only construction thing you could do here that would actually stop physical vibration, footfall style, or jumping up and down on the floor above, that type of noise would be to actually damp the upstairs floor.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Those rubber interlocking mats, those little square, those things, you could put that in whatever room it is that they're playing in. Upstairs, and that might make the biggest difference.
Yeah, because you
can
have
do
to,
other than decoupling your walls and ceilings.
You have to damp the actual upstairs floor. I mean, some people will point to the idea of if the only access you have is from below, that's the only place you can do anything, that you could take the step of doing something like green glue and strips of drywall that get attached to the underside of the floor. So like you're actually going, between the joists, because you can access it as a drop tile ceiling, and you actually like damp the floor from the underside with additional mass and damping material. But the problem is vibration is still coming through the joists into your T-bar ceiling, still to the rest of the structure of your walls. So I mean, that can damp the sound somewhat simply because you've added mass and damping to the underside of the floor itself, but it's not nearly as effective as just damping the upstairs floor. So that is not quick and easy exactly, especially if it's a permanent thing. But yeah, if you can put mats upstairs for people to walk on, then that's the way to do it.
I
don't think so.
So he tried to fish a speaker wire for his surround back speakers behind his back wall, which is an exterior wall. He didn't open the drywall, just tried to fish the wire from his drop tile ceiling down behind the drywall. No dice, he says. There's probably a fire block in the way, right? Could be. I would think so.
On an exterior wall, it's very likely, in fact.
Yeah. In my exterior walls, I don't have that, but I have cinder block construction with like furring strips, so I can fish it down and up, no problem. But I would imagine that that's probably what's going on here, and there is no super quick and easy solution for that. I don't go to wherever the fire block thing is, and then pull the wire back out and measure that and say, okay, that's how far down I can go, and then put a hole right there in your wall and put your speaker right there.
Yeah, no, I mean if the speaker wire has to go in the wall like this, you're going to open up a channel in the drywall because you're going to have to drill through the fire block to run your wire there, and then seal it back up because it's supposed to be a fire block and not have holes in it, so it needs to be properly sealed back up once the wire is run through it, and then you'll have to patch the drywall. It's not just going to be a simple thing where you can open up your drop tile ceiling and drop the wire down and have it come out. There probably is a fire block.
So if he wants to make some DIY backer boxes for his in-ceiling Atmos speakers, which are installed in his drop tile ceiling, do those backer boxes need to be 2 layers of material, or could he just make boxes out of a single layer of 5/8 inch MDF with some acoustic caulk to seal all the seams? And then fill the entire thing up with insulation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be fine. I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah,
I think you need to do 2 layers to do this.
Yeah, it's not going to be as sound blocking as the 2. So, I mean, if you go over to Soundproofing Company and look at their backer box solution, which is all the things, it is damped, decoupled, high mass, and what's the other one? Insulated. It's all 4 things. So that, that's sort of the Rolls Royce of backer boxes. And then if you look at like the Quiet Box and just want to copy their solution, I mean, theirs is basically just some OSB or MDF and then a layer of drywall inside of that. Typically, they're doing that because you want to have an interior drywall layer if this is going to be a backer box for a light, because you have to have the fire rating again. You don't just want to put it inside of a wood box. But for speakers that aren't going to be generating the type of heat that an in-ceiling light might do, the single layer is going to be fine. It's not going to be as sound deadening because it's just not as much mass, and it hasn't got a damping layer in between 2 layers of things. But it will still block more sound than no box at all, that's for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah. Martin previously asked about his 11 by 12 foot dedicated theater, in which he's using a PB2000 in the middle of the front wall and a PC2000 in the middle of the back wall. He has described how the frequency response of his bass is very linear in his middle seat, but there's a dip around 80 hertz, right in the 80 hertz crossover region for his left and right seats. So he wanted to know if he could do anything to improve that. The first thing we asked was if he was seeing the dip with only the 2 subwoofers playing, or the dip was when the subs and speakers were playing together, in which case raising his crossover setting might be all he needs to do, but the dip is only with the dual subs playing and no other speakers. We said passive bass traps would be the next thing that might help. He had about 1 foot of space behind his acoustically transparent screen, so he more or less filled that space up with 8 inches inch thick insulation with a 2-inch air gap. That seemed to make a difference in his room EQ wizard measurements. Speaking of which, yes, all of his concern is because he has fallen down the room EQ wizard rabbit hole. His measured response from 70 hertz on down, and all 3 of his seats is super flat and almost perfectly uniform. His center seat remains flat all the way up to about 160. The only problem is a dip from 75 to 125 hertz in both his left and right seats. At their worst, it is about a 10 to 12 dB dip. That's a pretty significant dip. And it's very similar on the left and right seats. Furthermore, if he does measure with any of his left, center, right speakers playing along with the 2 subs, the dips actually gets better, only about 6 dB down. But there are still dips in his left and right seats. He can see them. He cannot unsee them. So any other suggestions, or should you just get over it and move on? Dude's 11 by 12 foot room. To have only 1 problem in 2 seats that you don't sit in is like a phenomenal
These are like
result.
remarkable results too. Like when you see how uniform, if you can come to YouTube and see the pictures, or go over to Flickr and look, like the uniformity of the bass from 70 hertz down in all 3 of these seats is insane. And he's got well below 20 hertz response, like completely flat and linear. So
17 maybe, like just linear to 17 hertz. It's crazy.
Yeah. In all 3 seats, like really,
all 3
really
seats.
good.
Yeah, I mean, the line is nuts. This to me is just the fact that you are physically closer to the side walls in this very small room on this very large.
Definitely be some of it.
Is probably what's going on there. I just don't know that it's gonna ever get any better than this, and that you should delete Room EQ Wizard.
Well, also, I mean, we look at this stuff, and this is great information to have, but this can be the pitfall of relying on something like Room EQ Wizard, which gives you this visual indication of what's going on. Because like you said, you aren't ever listening to actual program material with just the 2 subwoofers and no speakers playing. And as soon as any of your front speakers are playing and there is this crossover happening, now that dip is only 6 decibels, and that's at 80 hertz, which we are not great at hearing. I would be very keen to know if you played a bass sweep, and I'm talking about a sweep that starts at, say, 300 hertz and plays down to 20 hertz. If you and that's through your speaker and dual subwoofer combo. So one speaker at a time, but through the combo of speakers and subwoofers, and you play a sweep. How noticeable that 6 decibel dip, which you can see and measure, I grant you completely, how noticeable it actually is to your human ears. And that's one of the reasons why, like in the setup guide that I wrote, not just because most people don't have measurement equipment or, aren't necessarily going to want to learn how to use it, but also because our ears are what ultimately matters. And if you're super worried about measurable visual differences, but you can't actually hear them, then you're going to drive yourself up a wall over something that you don't really need to. The other side of this is we mentioned how if you were seeing the dip when it was speakers plus subwoofers, that raising the crossover might help. You might actually be in an instance where lowering the crossover to 70 hertz might do it for you, because it sounds...
If you haven't taken the time to just change your crossover setting, please just play with
because,
it. Because at this point, it's free. It's free, and it only takes a little bit of time. And clearly, you've got no problem spending the time on this.
And you've got no problems from 70 hertz on down. Like, no problems from 70 hertz on down. So given that adding the speaker actually improved the situation, there's a possibility that, the speaker by itself crossing over at 70 hertz instead of 80 hertz might get you really, really, really good results. But ultimately, I want you to just play the bass sweep and hear it with your ears, because I don't think that a 6 dB dip at 80 hertz is actually going to be that objectionable. It's really hard to hear that.
Ari has a Hisense 65R6E 4K HDR Roku TV from 2018. That's just Hisense, dude. Way to name stuff. With a Denon S640H receiver. Both of them say they support HDMI-ARC, but he was going through settings for hours and he still couldn't get it to work. His Apple TV and Xbox are plugged into the Denon and their audio works fine, but when he tries to use the Roku apps that are built into his Hisense, the audio comes out of the TV's built-in speakers, and nothing he has tried makes it come out of the Denon instead. Can we help? I don't know.
Yeah, this should work. Now, there is one key thing that I think might be part of the problem, especially when you get into the situation where you're toggling settings and you're like, why isn't this working? And you're pulling your hair out because you've toggled settings back and forth and nothing seems to get it to work. In the Denon, you do not necessarily have to turn HDMI control on, because they have separated HDMI control from HDMI audio return channel. Those are two separate settings in the Denon. So you definitely have to turn HDMI audio return channel on in your Denon, and that is under the video section. Even though this is an audio return channel, it is under the video section of the Denon settings, because that is where all the HDMI settings is under the video subsection. So if this was just a case of not finding it, because by default, ARC is actually off on the Denon. So if you were like, this should be plug and play, why isn't it working? That could be part of it. So the video settings, HDMI subsection, make sure that at least HDMI ARC is turned on, but then you have to cycle the power of the Denon. If you were toggling it and wondering why it doesn't work, you have to cycle the power. It's like a settings change in your PC that requires a reboot before it actually takes effect.
Did you try turning it off and turning it back on again?
That's
always the answer.
That's what it is. So that might be it, because Lord knows I've done that type of thing where I've toggled the setting back and forth and it seems to make no difference, but it actually requires a reboot in between. And this is one of those cases. Also, there is another separate setting of the Denon called TV audio switching. And that is the thing where if an ARC signal is coming out of the television, the Denon will automatically go to the TV audio input. And you can choose whether that happens or not. Now, I turn that setting off because I want to select what input I'm using with my Harmony remote. So it's nice that the Denon lets you do that, because you can turn off the automatically going to the TV audio input and have your separate remote do that instead. But that's another setting to possibly change in the Denon. So the Denon is pretty clear. Now, the Hisense/Roku manual, because if you go to the Hisense manual, it says, please just go to this link, which is Roku's manual. I'm like, oh, great, wonderful job, Hisense, and it's basically useless. I couldn't find anything helpful in that thing, so I tried to look at some other videos that were Roku TVs and that. So the Roku menu is not super complicated. There's one settings part of the Roku menu. You go in there. You do have to make sure that HDMI CEC is on in your television. You cannot do the audio return channel without HDMI CEC being turned on. So that would be one thing to try. You do have to set the audio output to HDMI specifically. And you have to manually turn the TV speakers off. And that might have been the setting that wasn't done, is manually turning the TV's internal speakers off. So those are the three things to do in there, but there's nothing much else that you can do in the Roku TV. So I'm actually betting it was the power cycle thing. I'm betting you were toggling settings and it just wasn't working.
Greg. First up, Greg says he basically knew nothing before finding our podcast. That's okay. I still know nothing. I am like the nature of water. Don't know how those things go together, but I feel like Bruce Lee said them both. He had a Sony home theater in a box and a 46-inch TV. 46 inches. Yeah, okay. I was wondering, I was just doing the math in my head if that could have been a CRT, but I don't think so. Now, after listening to us for a while, he has a BenQ HT3550 with a 135-inch screen, an Onkyo RZ730 receiver with 5 Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers and 4 NHT Super Zeros for Atmos, a Dayton amp, Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray player, Apple TV 4K, and a Harmony hub, and most importantly, dual SVS PB 1000 subs. Yeah, sounds like you've been listening to the podcast.
That's a murderer's row right there.
That's a man who took some notes while we were talking. Good on ya. It has all been AVRant recommendations that he never would have found otherwise. His family loves it, and anyone who visits is blown away. So he says, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to try not to sneeze. You are definitely welcome. I'm not going to sneeze.
That is
I'm
great.
Try not to.
That's wonderful equipment. That, yes, deservedly so.
Well, and you see, the thing is this dude totally did not break the bank to do this.
Yeah.
Totally did not break the bank to do this, and everybody is impressed. And every once in a while, it seems like we go down the rabbit hole of how we can eke 1% more of performance for somebody who's wanting to spend like 10 grand on something. I'm like, this guy's like 95% of the way there. And like every upgrade on top of this is going to be so incremental compared to what he's got, unless he says the word room treatments, because he hasn't said those yet. And then in which case, then we've got something to work with. He is putting all of his gear into a large closet, but there's no electrical outlet in there. The closet outlet, the closest outlet outside the closet is a little over 15 feet away. He's using an APC J25 battery backup. Another AVRant recommendations. Its included power cable is 8 feet long, and it's a thick 12-gauge power cord. It is detachable and uses a standard IEC inlet. So would it be all right to just use an extension cord, even if that extension cord is thinner? I mean, I don't see any reason why an extension cord would be an issue here. I mean, I know the APC ones are like ridiculously thick and heavy.
There's a thick cord they give you.
I mean, but I mean. The APC, I mean, I use 100-foot extension cord on like a power saw. And I mean, those things, when those things rev up, I mean, they are pulling some serious juice. I just can't imagine that an extension cord would be a problem here. I definitely would get a hefty one.
I would get a 14 gauge. Which is readily available. There's oodles of 14 gauge extension cords. Now, I mean, look, the wiring inside your walls in all likelihood is 14 gauge. Almost always is, unless they specifically wired it up for a 20 amp circuit, in which case it'd be 12. But all standard Romex is 14 too, so that's 14 gauge stuff. So okay, cover your butts, because the always standard advice is you never connect a thinner gauge wire upstream of a thicker gauge wire. So the cover your butts response is we have to say that. If you get a 12 gauge extension cord, you are completely 100% safe. But on the risk, okay, I guess I have to say officially don't do this to legally cover ourselves, but a 14 gauge extension cord will be fine. Don't go for a skinny extension cord, some little 18 gauge thing. Don't do that. But 14 gauge should be absolutely fine.
I mean, this is also a question that you could send up to APC as well. I mean, you may just contact them and they'll say, oh, yeah, here, buy this.
Yeah.
And it might be more expensive, but then because APC has a serious warranty on their
That's
stuff.
true.
If you are if something happens and your gear gets broken, APC will cover a lot of it as long as you hooked everything up correctly.
Good point.
I would think it would behoove you to at least contact them and say, listen, this is my problem. What can I do? Your other solution,
APC very well might just have a longer power cord that they can send you.
I would not be surprised if that were the case. Not at all,
yes.
I mean, this is not a hugely expensive problem to fix either, though. Putting an outlet in that closet is not that hard. And it won't be, depending on how handy you are, it won't be cheaper than just buying an extension cord, but it would be a lot nicer than just having this extension cord running out from underneath your
and
closet
actually
door.
In a closet you don't even necessarily have to open up the wall. You could do a surface mount with the metal box with the metal sheathing that you would find in a warehouse or something like that. But in a closet, are you really going to care if the outlet is external on the wall? So it could be really quite fast and easy.
So we've already kind of answered this next question, but he says, could he buy a replacement power cord? Probably. I would call APC. If so, what's the thinnest gauge that would be all right? I would call APC, and he's trying to keep the cost as low as possible. I mean,
this isn't the place to skimp pennies, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars of insurance coverage by APC, trying to buy a off the rack Walmart three outlet power cord with 22 gauge wire or whatever that's in there is not the right way to go. I would the thing I would do is I would contact APC, and I would contact a handyman or an electrician, depending on who you got access to. They should be electrician, to say, hey, I want an outlet in this closet. How much will it cost you to do this, and what's the cheapest way you could do it for me? And just get some. I mean, they'll give you these quotes for free. I know nobody wants anybody in their house right now. I understand that. As a man who has plumbers and soon renovators coming in his house all the time, everybody's wearing masks constantly, and I'm practically taking spray paint and spraying everything that they touch with it so that I know what to clean after they leave. So I feel your pain, but this is. I don't think this is time to skip.
Yeah. The warranty coverage from APC themselves, that's the really main thing to consider. That's a really good point that Tom brought up there. So I'm betting if you contact APC, they'll be like, oh yeah, we've got longer cords. Here's what it costs.
Yeah. And I would just buy it, whatever it was, unless, or I would compare it with the cost for having something installed. Because, I mean, who really wants a power cord going into it?
Yeah, coming out under the closet and door, draping around.
Nathan says he likes Rob's 12-step guide to setting up dual subwoofers.
Woohoo!
Really? So, how is the...
In theory, it was fun to read.
Yeah, really. Didn't realize we had that many masochists listening to this podcast, but now we know that we have at least one.
We are really selling it.
When it comes to the tedious step of adjusting the phase knob via trial and error, is it really okay to accept the potential errors of human perception? Could Room EQ Wizard be used instead? Yes, it would be even more tedious.
He's aware.
But would it be more reliable? You could measure in at least 3 spots, move the phase knob, and repeat over and over until the graphs of all 3 measurements measurement spots look nearly identical, right? Yes.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah.
And you could drive yourself absolutely batty getting there. Because it is never going to, I mean, I think we've just shown with the listener a couple of questions ago, what you can see on a graph, especially you're sitting there with your little scroll reel and zooming into the thing going, it's not exactly right. Look at the, doesn't quite overlap here.
It's smooth.
It's not exactly, look at, guys, come see my line. It's all flat.
In this frequency, my left seat is up 1 decibel and my right seat is down 1 decibel. It's unacceptable. Continue searching.
God! Right? So yes, you could do this, and then we will visit you in the loony bin, as you put on your Huggy jacket and spend time in your padded room. So I think if you're going to go through the thing that Rob says to do on this thing, that adding Room EQ Wizard to this, you better be a hermit with or at least single. and have just literally nothing to do. Like nothing. Like there's no, like every project around your house, every friend is out of town. You've got 2 weeks to do nothing but make measurements and drive yourself crazy. I highly recommend you do not do this.
Right. And look, I've been down the rabbit hole learning about this stuff, and ultimately I've come to, hey, it's what I hear. And what I care about is, what does this sweep sound like? Does this sweep sound linear, and does it sound uniform across all 3 of my seats? If it does, then that means program material, to me, is going to sound even and uniform and accurate across all of my 3 seats. I am done. If I measure it and it turns out it actually isn't completely uniform, this seat is 3 dB louder and this seat is 3 dB quieter, but I'm like, I played the sweeps, I didn't notice it, it's good enough. And so that's the danger in using Room EQ Wizard, is you're going to see things that you can't hear. So that's the danger of it. But
and this is
you're
where
not wrong.
we diverge from audioholics, from all the other hi-fi sources that you have that are out there. I literally could not care less about the measurements when it comes to certain phenomena. Yes, it's very important that we take measurements. It's very important that a speaker measure flat or as flat as it can and echoically. I'm very concerned about off-axis response and that sort of thing. I'm worried about extension and all that. But when it comes down to it, don't come to me and say, oh, there's a blah, blah, blah change that's measurable.
Sure.
I don't care about measurable when it's in my room. I care about audible.
Yeah.
Okay, so these speakers have a noise floor. Okay, how far away are you sitting from your speaker? 12 feet. No, they don't. No, but they do. I can measure it. I can put my ear on the tweeter and I can hear it. I'm like, no, they don't. They do not have a noise floor that is perceptible to you. Therefore, they do not have a noise floor. That's what's important. If you cannot hear it, it does not exist. If you can't hear the difference between what you're seeing, it may be measurable, but it is not. It's not. It makes no difference in your viewing experience. So walk away.
Yeah. And I added a little bit after the important information, mainly that Lee Overstreet brought up. I added a little bit to that 12-step guide because I wanted to say, like, if you're listening to this and you happen across a phase setting early on where you're like, hey, that's pretty darn good, I'm like, you're done. You don't have to continue looking for the perfect one. It is never going to click. It is never going to magically snap into place where all of them are perfect. It's like
the clouds don't part and like a golden ray of sunlight comes down to you and fills your home theater with the warm glow of God's love. That's not going to happen. Don't wait for it. You get something good enough, you're like,
I'm like, in all these three seats, I don't have any outright null in any of them, and the ups and downs are all pretty much happening in about the same spot. I'm like, you're done. You found it. Yeah. Move on to the next step.
Secondly and lastly, he asks, how high up in a frequency should a bass sweep sound uniform across the seats? 200 hertz, higher, lower? I think 200 hertz is fine, though. I think Rob's going to say 300.
No, I think that's higher than you need.
Well, I mean... Go ahead.
No, I'll just say your low frequency effects channel goes up to 120. So I want to see uniformity to at least 120. But beyond that, I mean, 160 would be really nice because that is sort of the top end of the crossover of the sub that I care about, right? At that point, it's 24 decibels quieter, and I'm like, I don't really care about above 160.
So the reason I like 200 is because, first of all, it's a nice round number, and that always makes me happy. But more than that, as these sweeps are playing, I almost need like a warm up time as it starts. Right. As it starts, that initial hit always in my ear at least sounds louder and weirder than everything else. So if I can ignore the first second and a half of what's playing and then just focus on the rest of it, that's probably what's going to happen to my brain regardless. So I don't mind having a little bit of or overshoot at the top end as it's playing from 200 on down. If you're going the other direction, if you're going up, then I don't think that you need that. But if you're coming if you're playing the sweep down, which most people do, then I think 200 is not a bad place to start.
Sure.
That's just me. Heath has a new basement theater. His Aperion in-ceiling speakers got left behind in his old theater, so he went to Aperion's website to buy some more, but the previous models are gone. The new Clearus series are a bit more expensive. Clearus?
Clearus, it looks like. Clearus.
I know.
That's what they call them, dude.
This is Aperion?
This
I
is
didn't know they had
Aperion.
new speakers out. Only thing they ever send me is please buy our super tweeter because it totally does things that people can hear. These are in-wall in-ceilings. That's why I don't recognize them. They all look like car audio. I hate in-ceiling speakers. A bit more expensive, $325 a pair versus the old $300 a pair. But the bigger change is they're all angled now. It doesn't look as though Aperion has any in-ceiling speakers that are just fire straight down anymore. Heath looked around a bit, and this angled in-ceiling speaker design seems to be everywhere. Why? Are they actually beneficial? Well, we don't like them. So the only time that I've ever thought that angled speakers might not be the worst thing in the world is when somebody who decides that they absolutely have to have all their speakers in ceiling, even their front three speakers. I would sometimes say that, depending on the speakers, having the front three angled towards you at least is better than the option of just having them fire straight down.
Yeah, if they're going to be that.
But for every other position, especially Atmos, straight down is sort of the way to go. So why are they like this? Because people have asked for it, basically.
Yeah.
They're getting Atmos speakers, and they're like, but I want to angle towards me. And they're like, no, but, Dolby says they should go straight. Yeah, but I want to angle towards me.
Well, not only that, you remember how the SVS Prime Elevation speakers got out there, and then we magically started seeing a lot of other speaker companies with wedge-shaped speakers that could be mounted high up on your walls and angled in all sorts of ways because they have a built-in angle in them. Years ago, at this point, Golden Ear brought out their in-ceiling speakers, and because they use a folded ribbon, more directional tweeter, they made some designs that had this angle built into their in-ceiling speakers, and their demos were good. I mean, they were good demos. I give them all the credit in the world for that. People at these trade shows, including other brands and vendors, got to look at these and go, oh, hey, look at those. That's a novel thing. And hey, listen to that demo. That's pretty good. Maybe we should make an angled in-ceiling speaker. And magically, we've seen that all these other brands now have these in-ceiling speakers with an angle built into them. I really do think it is a copycat monkey see, monkey do type of situation, because we've seen this multiple times with, somebody comes up with a fairly new and has an impressive demo of a design, and you see copycats in the years that follow. So I really think that's what's going on industry-wide, and now it's just become kind of a thing. And like Tom says, there are people who expect it. People can't get it out of their mind that the speaker has to be pointing at them for it to sound right, but it's supposed to be kind of diffuse and up there when it's
so there's a bunch of as I look at Aperion stuff, there's a bunch of on-ceiling speakers that are not angled. They're all on sale. They're all clearance.
Yeah.
So I would pick those up if you're really dedicated. But you're right. All the new ones are all angled, except for the on-walls or the in-walls ones, which are not.
Yeah.
So I guess you could use those. I don't see any reason why they just not going to have a backer box. All right, here. Let's do one more, and then we're going to be done. RD. We suggested that Hi-Fi Man Sundara headphones for RD a few episodes back. He bought a pair and gave them a try. They were very nice, great build quality, very comfortable, and they did sound great, but the difference wasn't so huge over a Sennheiser RS160 headphones they could really justify the price, so we returned them. He found the audition useful, though, as it helped him understand what sound qualities are just inherent to headphones versus speakers, and the sorts of sound quality differences we try to describe. On a related but different topic, he was paying close attention to the lip sync while auditioning the Hi-Fi Man's headphones. His Denon X3700H has an auto lip sync setting, and it actually did seem to work. But how? What is it detecting and adjusting, and is it reliable, or could it not work automatically in some cases? Honestly, okay, so I don't know the answer to how they do this. I imagine there's some sort of, because if you look you couldn't always see this, but occasionally on TVs that would have like a pixel match, and you're watching TV or maybe some other source, you would sometimes see the audio track be displayed on your TV, and you would see it to the side. So I imagine that there's some sort of syncing signal that tells you this is when the video is starting to make sure this is where the audio is supposed to start, and it should do that for you automatically. It almost always works. I mean, I've almost never had a problem with it working, and the only times I've ever had a problem with it working, it's the source and not the receiver or something. Like streaming certain episodes from Netflix, no matter what I stream them on,
The lip sync is
the
off.
the lip sync is off. It's just off, and it drives me bad. I think the first episode, or one of the very early episodes of White Collar, is like that, and it just drives me batty. I just can't stand it. But there's no fixing it, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah, no, this is an HDMI feature, and actually right from Denon's manual about the auto lip sync setting, it says this automatically adjusts the audio processing time to compensate for delays in audio-video timing from TVs compatible with auto lip sync, and then it says automatic correction may not be performed depending on the specifications of your TV. So this is an HDMI thing where the auto lip sync has to be available both on your television and in the AV receiver. So situations where it wouldn't automatically do anything, well, if it's an analog audio connection or just any non-HDMI connection, auto lip sync won't do a thing. This only works over HDMI. And then, like Tom said, if the lip sync problem is in the source itself, well, there's nothing that the auto lip sync can do about that.
Amazon Prime, like all the lip sync was off when we first got that thing. It was so annoying.
But it's basically just a timing thing because the television is introducing whatever latency it introduces, but the signal is aware of that, and the AV receiver, if you have video processing turned on inside of the Denon, then that's at whatever latency. If you have video processing turned off, then it has to know that as well and make sure that it isn't delaying the audio signal in relation to that. So it's just taking into account the latencies, and that's supposed to be transmitted in the clocking synchronization signal in the HDMI
Judder. There's Judder. Did somebody hear? He said clock. There must be Judder somewhere
Jitter.
in here.
That'd be Jitter if it's in the clocking. Yes.
Jitter, Judder. Shudder. Dumber. Sorry. All right, let's do one more. Cool. We got time. Alex is back after we discussed his townhouse living room's theater setup, and there it is.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I was hoping you
might
remember.
He's going to take our advice and go with the Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers. He's also decided to go with the Sierra Lunas for surrounds. These very well might be his forever speakers, so why not go whole hog, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so last time we helped him pick his speakers. All right. He figured out the real size of the Rhythmic FVX15, and we were right. It's too big.
It's practically a 2-inch cube, a 2-foot cube, practically.
Foot cube,
almost.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, 2 feet's not that big. Yeah, build a box. Build a box. This is the guy we told to build a box because he was like talking about these massive subwoofers. The PC 2000 Pro cylinder could actually work, as would a sealed sub, of course. Would ported versus sealed make a big difference? In output, it does. So
yeah, so this is the townhouse setup. So he's got stairs that go upstairs, no doors on either end. It's open to his kitchen. So I would strongly recommend ported.
Yeah, ported cylinder is the way to go here. Yeah. Bigger the better. Since he's going with the Sierra 2 bookshelf speakers, he needs stands. He was going standless, as we often recommended, but how do we recommend securing the speakers to the stands? I don't.
Well, Blue Tack or Museum Putty, that's what I always go for here.
Yeah, I got mine on standless stands, and I've actually got the patented AVRant sound speaker isolation pad underneath it, which is probably not the best thing because I think they're
slippy. They're not secure at all.
So I will end up getting the Museum Putty eventually because it both decouples and sticks them there, but I just haven't gotten around.
Museum Putty's great. It I mean, you have to really knock it to take it off. It can be.
And then you could fill the stand of sands with kitty litter halfway up or whatever to make them sort of secure.
But it also gives you damping, which is great acoustically. So Museum Putty's a wonderful solution.
Any recommendations for wall mounts for the Luna surrounds? No. I mean, Santa's usually has mounts, right? Doesn't Santa's have mounts?
They do, but I mean, I don't think you need to pay that much. The Lunas are only 9 pounds, and they're only 6 inches deep. You don't have to go nuts here. So I like Video Secu as a company that makes nice, inexpensive stands now, or wall mounts. Now, you got 2 choices because the Lunas they have a keyhole mount on the back. So if you actually just want to flush mount it on your wall, all you need is a screw with an anchor in your wall and you keyhole mount it like that. So that might be enough. But I'm thinking maybe he wants to aim it or angle it or something because in his setup, his surround speakers are going to have to go on wall sections that are behind his couch. So maybe he wanted to angle them a little bit. So they do have a, a 1/4-20 threaded insert. which is the exact type of threaded insert that most single prong wall mounts have. So VideoSecU has a nice little universal satellite speaker wall mount. It's good for 10 pounds, but that's, the Lunas are 9 pounds, so that's all right with that threaded insert, little ball joint, so you can aim it how you want to. Only $16 for a pair of those from VideoSecU, so can't complain about that. Or if you want something that's a little beefier and can hold a lot more weight, for $29 a pair, they have their side clamping ones, which I actually really like, those side clamping wall mounts. And as AVRant listener Damien pointed out, you can turn around the base plate of the side clamping so that it doesn't stick out as much. You can just rotate it 180 degrees, and then the clamps are at the back of the speaker instead of the front, and it doesn't stick out as much. So either of those.
Okay. Yes, what are our thoughts on subwoofer isolation pads like the Auralex Subdude? Do they make a big, worthwhile difference? Answer, yes, and other answer, you don't need it, because you're going to get the PC, the cylinder sub, and it's going to come with the
isolation feet.
The isolation feet, which are already doing the same thing as the Subdude. So you don't need it. Comes free from SVS.
Yeah.
You get your own isolation
it's
pads. You're fine.
Another great reason to get the cylinder. But yeah, I am hugely in favor of damping / decoupling your subwoofers from the floor. I wish everybody would do it. I wish every subwoofer came with a way to do it, because it never hurts and it very often helps. And you're in a townhouse. We do care about structural vibration getting to your neighbors.
Yes, we do.
It's well worth it to have your sub damped / decoupled from your floor.
So we said his current layout is fine, so he's going to keep the couch and TV where they are. Where will we prioritize acoustic treatments with this layout? Is there a specific order for placements that he should follow? Let me scroll back up.
So he has fairly open space directly behind his couch, because that's going into his entrance area and the stairway.
Right.
So he doesn't he certainly doesn't have a back wall close to the back of his seats. So normally one of the first places we talk about is the wall behind you, because many people have a back wall that is close behind their seats, and that can make a very noticeable difference for your dialogue intelligibility. But in your case, your back wall is quite far behind you, and it's probably not realistic, because it kind of be on your stairs, right? That's where, and the low part of your stairs. So you could potentially still put something on your back wall, but normally that's the number one place. In your case, it probably isn't.
There's no left wall to worry about, because it fires
not
into
so
everything
much,
else.
and into the opening of his kitchen.
And the right wall has got a fireplace on
does.
it. So putting an acoustic panel on the fireplace doesn't seem like a good idea.
And again, our second place that we'd always have it is on the sidewalls. But in your case, your specific case, that's going to be, that's not going to go on the fireplace, and we're not very worried about the left-hand side.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I would worry about. I'm not even really worried about much, but I would put them as many places as you can in here.
Yeah.
Just in general, just whatever acoustic panels you can place would be good.
Especially if this is a hard floor. I don't know if this is a carpeted floor or a hard floor, but a lot of townhouses are a hard
rug,
floor.
If not. Yeah.
So if you've got a hard floor, then at that point, without furniture in the room, you likely have an outright echo in here. And when that's the case, you just want absorption anywhere that you can reasonably put it. And please keep in mind, if you were going to hang artwork anywhere, get that as a printed panel. Now you're killing two birds with one stone. You've put absorption into the room with lovely artwork that's printed onto the fabric of the panel, and literally anywhere will help you. But yours is a case where the front wall, the front wall very often is like
the best place to put
the last place we treat if we're going in order. But in your case, it makes a lot of sense, because the other locations that we would go to first don't really make sense in your particular setup.
I look at that front right and that back right corner as being, if you're not going to put the sub in one of those places, then I see that as being a place where you could put some bass, some corner traps, or put in some stuff in there. But the front wall, and then just sort of sporadically throughout, you just basically want to catch as many echoes as you can. So sporadically throughout this whole space, this whole room, and then maybe those corners, or one of those corners if the sub's going in the other one. I like the sub just to the right of the fireplace.
And he said that's very likely where he's going to put it.
Yeah. So then you could put, bass trapping in both front and rear right corners.
And possibly even in the, I mean, we'd call it the front left corner of this room, I suppose. It's way over to your left, but, even over there. But yeah,
Anywhere.
This is more or less a case where we're not super worried about distinct reflections in your particular setup. We're worried about the overall room having a reverberation or an echo to it. And when that's the case, then it doesn't really matter where you put it. We just want to make sure you have enough to cut down on any echo or reverberation.
So, 30% of the room is supposed to be treated in some way? Ideally. And if you don't have carpet in here, which I doubt you are going to have carpet in here, you literally cannot put enough room treatments to get to that number. It's not reasonable to expect somebody to do that. Yeah. So as much as possible, wherever you can put it, like Rob said, have artwork printed on it, make it accent pieces.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily skimp on the just because you're trying to save a little money. In this case, you got to live with this in bright daylight. It's not like my home theater where my panels are kind of garbage, and because I made them myself, and I don't know.
Head over to Acoustimac and GIK, because look through their lineups. They've got lots of cool shapes. They've got lots of cool colors and patterns and designs. Acoustimac has like suede panels, that sometimes that looks really nice. So check out their whole lineups, because there's a lot more ways to come at this than just plain black rectangles. It doesn't have to be that. These things can look cool. You can have artwork printed on them, and you can make this a design feature as well as an acoustic treatment.
Yeah. So who do we have left?
Indeed. Let's see. I was starting to scroll back up, but I got to scroll back down. Let's see. We just did Alex, right? So we got Infinite Gary, Colin, Michael, and JR.
All right. JR. All right, I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Derek and Manuel for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, as well as our 121 patrons over at patreon.com.
For sure. Derek and Manuel, thank you so much for the PayPal donations, and patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who might like to sign up for an ongoing automatic monthly donation. Thanks so much to our 121 patrons over there.
We also want to say thank you to the people who thanked us for keeping this podcast going. That includes Bob, Ari, Greg, Nathan, another Nathan, Rob, and Joe.
Yep, I'll just repeat the names: Bob, Ari, Greg, Nathan, the second Nathan, Rob, and Joe. Really appreciate those notes of gratitude. So thank you to everyone out there for continuing to listen.
I want to congratulate Scott for winning our contest last week, and thank Andrew once again for providing a model to help support the podcast. Thank you, Andrew, very much for being one of our many listeners of the week. We thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Andrew, and congrats, Scott. And I'm great. It's great that you two got in touch and it all worked out swimmingly. So happy about that.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.